Good morning.
The first order of business on any and all county board meetings is public comment. If there's anyone present or online who would like to share any thoughts with the county board, either come to the mic or let us know through your online presence. You'll be asked to state your name, your address, and you'll be given 2 minutes to address the county board. Is there anybody here who would like to share any thoughts with the county board? Is there anyone here or online? Mr. Bamnick.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vagley, and County Commissioners, this morning I'm honored to bring you an invitation from the Winona County Fair Board, Cindy Tim and the Fair Board members, inviting you to the 166th Annual Winona County Fair this week, and to emphasize that everyone is invited, not just the commissioners, but we're hoping to see you. The week has endless numbers of recognitions and special salutes to folks that have done a great job in all kinds of areas, many related to agriculture during the past year. And at the fair are 5 days. Each day honors a special person who are representative of the very best of Winona County. This year, Wednesday is Gail Getzman Day. Gail was a lifelong educator from Winona, and also specialized in raising horses, horsemanship, and also detailing horses. On Thursday, we will have Shirley Francis Day. Shirley, a lifelong Winona County resident, was very involved and still is in township government, is the treasurer for Warren Township, and also spent many years in healthcare, especially senior healthcare. And the list for each of these people goes on, but I'm just mentioning a couple of things, a couple of highlights. That's Thursday. Friday is Dave Schwann's Day. The Fair Board is really thrilled because there has not been a representative from the greater Altura area for a number of years. And Dave reflects the very best. Many days almost single-handedly keeping the ambulance service going and spending a lifetime in banking and real estate and helping many people in that area. All right, on Saturday, we have an interesting day with Dale and Clara Newcomb, kind of a family event. They've been involved in 4-H all their lives. They had children in 4-H and then worked endlessly for 4-H projects. We're just thrilled to have this husband and wife as a team and honored on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we have Tom Campbell Day. Tom is a member of the Fair Board and puts a lot of time in for the Fair Board and for agriculture in general. So that's our beginning lineup. Our recognition is Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. It'll be at the County Fairgrounds in St. Charles at the recognition tent. We hope all of you will be there. And I also hope that 1 year from today, I'll be able to come back and say we have at least one county commissioner that should be having a day at the fair. I think all of you should be honored, and we're going to work on that. Anyone else? Marcia, you're very involved.
It's a great event. It can be free. You can park on the street and walk in, or you can pay for parking. All kinds of events. Just come and enjoy and support the youth too in the barns.
One thing you're going to notice is a little different is the dairy cattle because of the avian flu. You're not going to see the dairy cattle. There's still going to be plenty of cattle there, but you see the barns are, just not quite as populated as they normally are. And don't think that that's because we don't have the cattle. It's just they're taking the precautions to make sure they don't bring them to the fair this year.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we're also encouraging people that would like to wear a mask to do that. There's thoughts that there's new variants of the COVID sickness that are among us, and certainly we want to be helpful. There are events for everyone of all ages. The carnival's set up. They've got some fantastic rides and just a lot of activity for these 5 days. So if I didn't mention it earlier, I'm Bob Bamnick, Winona County Recorder, 2024 Clinton, Winona. And I'm rural Winona, and I grew up spending summers with my cousins on their farm and have a lot of ag background. So I am serving for my 32nd year as the recognition chair at the fair, and I'm proud of that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. See you Thursday.
Is there anybody else in the audience or online that would like to address the county board? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone present or online that would like to address the county board? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment. The next item on the agenda is to approve the county board meetings, county board minutes. 3.1 is Board of Appeal and Equalization from June 25th. 3.2 are the amended county board minutes, just changing a person in attendance, which was myself.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Elsing, seconded by Commissioner Meyer. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next on the agenda, item 4, acknowledge the receipt of different committee minutes. 4.1, Parks and Environment Advisory Committee. 4.2, Board of Adjustment. 4.3, Planning Commission.
Move approval,
Second.
acceptance.
Motion by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Elsing. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 5, consent comments and approval of the agenda. Commissioner Elsing,
Nothing for me, comments at the end.
Commissioner Ward,
Just an announcement, please, at the end.
Commissioner Olson,
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Meyer,
Nope, nothing from me.
Ms. Holte.
I would request to move the lost discussion from being 7.3 to being 7.1, if we may.
Thank you. Ms. Sonneman.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay. We first need to approve the amended
I'll move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Elsing. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the consent comments. Ms. Holte, could you please read those into the record?
6.1, approve conditional use permit for Thomas Viral. 6.2, approve conditional use permit for Zachary Vick and Grant Vick. 6.3, approve conditional use permit for Curtis Mund. 6.4, approve conditional use permit for Theodore and Linda Booth. I guess that is it, right?
Do,
No, we got someone with access. Yeah.
Department rep. Yep.
6.5, approve renewal of DocuSign contract. 6.6, approve purchase of sandbags. 6.7, approve well sealing contract with City of Altura and voucher payment. 6.8, authorize disposal of excess furniture and equipment. 6.9, approve resolution for donation received from Search Operations Assistance Recovery Association. 6.10, approve purchase of Search Operations Assistance Rescue Vehicle. And 6.11, confirm payment of disbursements.
Move to approve the consent business.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Commissioner Olson. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. That brings it down to general business, item which was prior, before it was 7.3, now it becomes 7.1, approved the lost local option sales tax referendum ballot language resolution.
I guess, yeah, and I appreciate you moving this up because I have
Absolutely.
to get to first appearances. So Ms. Holte and I have been working with the Todd Rapp Strategies company. And with their help, we've modified the question. And that was kind of the holdup. The question was, both Commissioner Ward and Commissioner Elsing had asked to have that reviewed. So this, I think, is the fourth iteration. So it has multiple eyes on it. So, and we've been working with the company. We've had, well, there was a meeting yesterday. I was unfortunately not able to make that, but contributed my notes. And we've met with them several times before that. So that's underway. So if you have any questions?
Commissioner Ward?
Yeah, so just for clarification then, is the exact language on page 129?
It would be what's in the resolution.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
resolution part. So it's that last paragraph on,
Yeah, and
Okay.
there's certain restrictions, your treasurer, Chelsea Kilbright, no, Chelsea's in here. I don't see.
No.
Okay, also had reminded all of us that it can only be so many words.
it looks,
And so, she also had input in that because that's important to meet the qualifications of the ballot language or the ballot restrictions. So
Okay, and then the other question I have, there's going to be more than our requests for funding. Do we know where it falls on the ballot? Does the county start and then the school districts go down, or is the school districts first? And,
I have no idea at this point.
okay, maybe we can check with Chelsea. Knowing that there's going to be multiple asks for additional dollars, it may be
The only one I know of at this point is
Lewiston.
Lewiston.
Lewiston
And
for sure.
Are they for sure on? I don't know. I just read the paper.
The last I heard, it was pretty much for sure. It's a different amount than they asked for
Less, right.
last time.
Yeah.
Such, okay.
My question is, does the general public see this as just an additional tax? And what about the property tax aspect of it being removed?
Well, that's the education campaign that we're doing with, or the county's doing with RAP strategies will hopefully help clarify what this is about. And when they see it on the ballot, those who have gotten the information and the ballot itself, sorry, I'm trying to get to that language here.
The question doesn't say anything.
No.
No, I was hoping
Removal.
in the question itself, it would, in the question posed on the ballot would emphasize that we're replacing one tax with another tax, just a different way to go about it. And we can educate and say this is a better way to go about it. And again, I don't want to keep dragging this thing out, but that was my goal, was people understood this as a shift.
Ms. Holte?
So part of what we were informed as working with RAP strategies is that what is really the question that is being posed to the citizens? It's really not what should we do in reference to where we're taking the money from. It's what are we asking them to approve? We're asking them to approve how to fund the gym that's already built. You see what I'm saying? And so they believe me, they had to keep refocusing us as
Yeah.
well about what is really the question that you're asking the citizens. And it's, how do you want to pay for it?
I don't
Unfortunately, I
disagree
think
with
it's going to
that.
be clear as mud to the
Yeah,
general
unfortunately, I
public.
don't disagree with that the question has to be clear, but I think if you polled 100 people and just asked 100 people, how's this jail getting paid for? How many people would actually know right now? And then on top of that, if they see something like this, they're just gonna say, oh, they want an additional tax. They might not even know how it's getting taxed now and paid for. So that I completely agree that the question has to be clear. But I think just as important is we need to help the person that may not follow government to the nth degree to really understand that, hey, this is a shift. I think that's just as important as understanding what we're voting for.
Ms. Holte?
So part of our dialogue yesterday with the Spark entity was exactly that question, is how do we get from A to Z and sharing that information with the community? And so that's part of the communication, education, public meetings, et cetera, that we're working on putting together, is all of that explanation. It's really hard to put all of that in one, because it's supposed to be a question.
Yes.
It's not an education piece. The ballot's not an education piece. It's a question. So I hear what you're saying, but unfortunately, we have to have the ballot question ready soon
In this month.
before we're ready with all of our education and communication strategy.
Commissioner Ward, Commissioner Olson.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
and-
Commissioner Ward and Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, it's, in my opinion, too late. I mean, we've already taxed them and we've already done this. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate that we didn't accomplish before you start laying bricks in the ground, how are you going to pay for it? So usually a common process, if somebody's building a house, they got to figure out how to pay for it before they build it. They don't build it and then, oh, by the way, Mr. Banker, I need, $500,000 to pay for my house I just built. So it's contrary to common logic, in my opinion, but it's what we got to do.
Commissioner Olson.
Well, I completely appreciate it. And just reading this sentence and having read it a bunch of times, my suggestion would have been, and again, because words are limited here in the second sentence, and related costs for the newly built Winona County Jail. And then we just kind of had some that replaced the old jail built in 1970. That's completely irrelevant to me. To me, it should say replacing the current property tax. I mean, we could even shorten it up, to some extent. And again, I'm just saying something to that nature.
Ms. Holte and Ms. Sonneman.
Well, to your point, Commissioner Elsing, there's not a certainty as to whether this would replace the current property tax in terms of, will the property tax go down because of this? We don't know. Okay, or I mean, so that would leave some, I think, questions in the minds of the voters. Well, okay, you're gonna now reduce our property taxes. That may be the case. I mean, and we've talked about this, and the RAP strategies, they've done this many times with many other communities very successfully, and they're very good with coming or making the point coming across about what we're trying to do. And this, and I think it's everybody's different perspective, but at least I think we felt it was important to put in that the new jail replaces the old jail that was built in 1970, because that's a reason why we built a new jail. We could go into either more, detail, but you can't put it in a, what was it? How many words were we limited to? Ms. Holte, I forget, but.
You could have used the word mandated.
Well, and that's part of it, that the old jail was condemned.
It wasn't something we wanted to do. It
Right,
wasn't.
and there's
we
so
were
many
mandated to
issues
it.
in this one thing, and to tidy it up in one paragraph is very difficult. But I think, again, there were many heads, good heads on this in terms of coming up with the language and editing it. So I think, again, and that's my perspective. Commissioner Elsing, you have a different perspective. Everybody has a different perspective when they read something. But again, it says imposing a sales tax. It doesn't say property tax. It doesn't say raising property taxes. It doesn't say reducing property taxes. It says, as a voter, are you willing to approve a sales tax to pay for the $28 million bonds issued for the new jail? So, it leaves to everybody's, I think, belief that, okay, then something's going to happen probably with the stream of property taxes, that hopefully there'll be, not so much pressure on property taxes.
Mr. Elsing.
So the logic that I hear is that we can't guarantee the property tax is going to go down. And we talked about the educational aspect of informing people that the property tax may go down. How is it any different? I mean, what on a piece of educational literature or on the discussions that are have outside, do we put it may be, it's the whole point of this to me was to help the public understand that this is going to be a replacement tax, and the fact that we can utilize a larger portion of people traveling through tourism, college, it covers a much broader base of people outside of our region even. So that was the point that I wanted. So if there's no assumption that, hey, we're going to take the taxes down on this side and replace it with this tax, I myself would be skeptical to vote for this, because to me, it just looks like an additional tax. So I think I have the floor, thank you. At the end of the day, to me, the whole point of restructuring this was so that people understood what we were trying to achieve. And I think we missed the mark. It is laid out very, very clear as to what we're going to do, what it's for, how long it could be, et cetera, but we're missing the mark as to we're trying to offset and do this. So in the educational piece, if we can't do it here with a simple, potentially replacing, or put whatever verbiage is that we have to, that at least associates something to that. If it's impossible here, then how is it possible in any educational piece that we might put out? And so I strongly disagree with the way this is written, not because of the verbiage and how it's written, and I don't need a replay as to what's on here, I can read it. My thing is that it's missing one of the key points to the average person that reads this, that may have not done all of their homework and figured out what this is and just simply says, huh, looks like another tax. No. That's my point.
Ms. Sonnet, do you want to jump, did you want us to
Well,
respond?
No, I'll just get into
I think,
yeah.
I apologize. I think we're gonna have to make a small revision anyways, because as it currently reads, it says, and related costs, I'm on the second line, and related costs for the newly built Winona County Jail that replaced the old jail built in 1970. I see a question mark there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll have to make a small tweak anyways. I agree with Commissioner Elsing that I think we could, everything that's done, I appreciate all these improvements. I think there's a simple, the next sentence says, if approved, collections from the sales tax would be used as the source for repayment of the $28 million in bonds issued for the new jail, comma. I think if we struck plus interest and bond issues and instead said, and would mean the jail will no longer be paid through property taxes, that's what you're looking for, right? Or
And I
something-
don't know how the verbiage.
Something like,
Something.
something like that,
Correct.
because
Thank
I
you.
think
Yeah.
it needs to be more clear to a voter that hasn't seen the educational pieces, that we're not adding an additional tax, we're replacing it. And so I see, Ms. Sonneman, you said we shouldn't, guarantee that property taxes will go down, even though that's all of our hope, but it would mean the jail will no longer be paid through property taxes, I
Going
think,
forward.
going
Yes.
forward.
Correct.
All right, just to your point, that is a question. Shall Winona
it is a
County be?
question.
So the question mark is accurate. Not that I dispute
Oh, thank you.
adding whatever it is you're suggesting, but that is a
Actually, if you
question.
back it up, it is a question.
That is a
Thank you.
question.
It's a long, complex
Oh, yeah.
sentence, you're
Yeah,
right.
no, I would have agreed with you originally, yeah.
Does it all have to be one paragraph? You're blending so much in there.
There
You know, if I have a line break, then my mind resets and it's kind of a different, you've got a lot of stuff thrown in there. And it's confusing. So if after that first part, then if approved, if you could even have just a break and then start another paragraph.
Mr. Meyer.
I don't know.
Thanks. So I just want to back up to what you said. This has to be approved this month.
Yes.
Does it
Yeah.
have to be approved at this meeting?
We're going to be on a very
Very
tight
tight, yes.
timeline.
So
if
that would
we
be your-
pushed it to the 23rd.
Yes, this is your preference? Okay.
It is, because it gives the
And-
auditor treasurer time.
How, I guess the question is, I am agnostic about this, right? So I will vote for it exactly the way it is right now, but I want to know how difficult it is to make this adjustment, and do we know exactly how many words? we
Could
have?
I suggest
Ms. Sonneman.
about if approved, collections from the sales tax would replace property taxes and would be used?
Perfect.
How's that?
It's
Perfect,
better.
that's all I'm at.
Motion to approve.
Did we capture that? Did we capture that?
After the word sales tax, or I'm sorry,
Approved.
from the sales tax would replace property taxes
Yes, perfect.
and would be used.
That's all I wanted.
Correct.
Okay,
Helps.
All right.
May I pose a question to our finance director?
yes.
Mr. Elliott, how do you feel about that? I mean, you were part of the conversations. Do you think that would
There
cause
was
any?
like a break there. It's
concern?
too much of a thought. It's a ramble.
No, because that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay.
It's okay.
And if you can get a space in there, or 2 paragraphs. If you can.
I would agree if we could do that,
Okay.
if it's legal, because, yeah,
A
that's long.
space after question mark?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then
Right.
if approved, it's a whole nother concept.
Ms. Sonneman, well, I guess if someone makes a motion, they can restate
I
it.
just did.
Commissioner Olson made the motion
With the space.
with,
With this.
With a space, if possible.
Make
I
it
will
so.
second that.
As long as we don't have to print a second page of the ballot.
right, so, and Ms. Sonneman, can you read it one more time, or
Sure.
Ms. Holte, do you have it?
Oh. Okay, so the motion would be a space after the question mark for a new paragraph.
Yep.
Yep.
If approved, comma, collections from the sales tax would replace the property tax being used as a source of, as the source for repayment.
Yeah, yep.
Would replace.
You got that?
Would replace is the important
I
part.
do. I just want to make one point of clarification that depending on timing of when revenues may come in for 2025, we still have to use property taxes to pay for the bond.
Right, yeah.
So I just want to be perfectly open on that.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yep,
Yeah, no
until,
problem.
until this goes into effect,
Right.
absolutely.
And enough accumulates to actually make a
Yes.
payment.
And we blame the state for that because they collect the sales tax.
Well, I just
And made
wanna
us
be-
build the
I want
jail.
to be transparent.
And
because
mandated
if
the
you
jail.
get Questions, and we're using levy money, but it's because we haven't received.
Right, on November 6th, it won't immediately drop. Yep. Correct.
Right.
I did just want
Commissioner.
to clarify one thing that Commissioner Ward said that I think is inaccurate, and I've heard before in public. And that is that we built the jail without a plan to pay. We did have bonds and we did have a plan, and we certainly did map out exactly what the consequence would be to sales taxes from every classification. So we did make a plan.
And the county board did try, it just that the state legislature 3 sessions ago basically ended with approval of nothing, so.
However, we made Commissioner Ward is absolutely correct that we made the decision prior to
Right.
even this discussion. It's something that at least from my perspective, the Chamber of Commerce
Yeah.
was asking us to consider.
Good. All right, all those in favor, say, I'm sorry, all those in favor of the amended language, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Commissioner Elsie, and thank you, Ms. Sonneman, for that. That does, I think, make it much more clear.
I agree.
So if someone had missed the educational, that'll be more clear.
Just a follow-up.
Commissioner Ward.
Any idea when this quote educational material is going to become available? Now that we've got a language statement, any idea when they're going to hand it to us? Because I mean, November is just around the corner, and we got all these summer events, and if we don't have anything to, any idea?
Did you guys adjust that schedule?
So I would say late July into August.
Okay.
So
I
you'll
want
give
to
us an
say
update.
August was going to be the timeframe.
Yeah.
We discussed yesterday having like the first week of August as education time.
Yep.
So like to train those who will be answering questions for the public.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda was formerly 7.1, receive presentation from the Primary Prevention Project to stop sexual and domestic violence. We have Ms. Bagshaw here. Welcome.
Hi, Helen.
Hi,
Morning.
well, I don't know if I can talk through this, but thank you for having me. My name is Helen Bagshaw. I am the chair of the Primary Prevention Project, and I'm here really just to say thank you. You funded the project again for 2024 for $3,000. So I wanted to come in person to kind of share a few slides, a little bit about what we're doing in the community. Will somebody, yeah,
Yep.
great. So for you people who might not have met me before or don't really know anything about the project, we are a group that want to prevent sexual and domestic violence by providing primary prevention, so stopping violence before it happens. And we understand it's not just individuals or groups, but we need to talk to legislators and policymakers. And again, that's in our action plan. But our ultimate goal is to ensure that our communities are safe for everyone.
If you say
The next slide.
She'll hear you, yep.
So the group started in 2008, and we have 22 community agencies and organisations that we collaborate with throughout the year. And we did become a non-profit in 2019. And so the next slide, please. And these are our coalition partners. But I really want to give a shout out to our community volunteers. It's great having people from different organisations, but it's the people in the community with the passion that share with us every month about raising awareness on sexual and domestic violence. Next slide, please. So we do have an action plan, and I'll just go through that really briefly. So if we could do the next slide. So we collaborate and engage with our coalition members to promote and provide primary prevention. And a few of the things that I want to highlight are we provide a free Darkness to Light community training in the community. This is a child sexual abuse prevention training that we work with community leaders. A new thing that we're doing in 23-24 is 2 of the primary prevention members are responsible beverage server trainers, and we are working with Winona Police Department and the hub to not only go out to our bar servers to talk to them about the importance of serving correctly to appropriate age people, but giving them resources on helplines and things for domestic violence, sex trafficking, and assault and human trafficking. We're doing community conversations at Winona events, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in the next slide. We also work with our media. Oh yeah, here you go. I talked about influencing policy and legislation and how important that is, because I can talk to community people all day, but it's when we go up that spectrum of prevention and where we actually change laws and promote that really makes the difference. So again, I appreciate being here today with you. The next slide, please. We, of course, part of our action plan is to encourage coalition partners. We meet the 4th Monday of the month, and we're also a member of the Winona area nonprofits, which again gives us access to all the other nonprofits and different organisations in Winona County. Next slide, please. So this is just a little snapshot of things that we've been doing and that we're involved in. The first one there is our community conversation, which we had in October. This was with Winona State, the Advocacy Centre. We had a local panel. We had a keynote speaker from Minneapolis, Raina Alexander, who talked about sexual and domestic violence prevention. It was a great event, especially at that time with the Maddie Kingsbury and everything that was going on. We had a lot of people there, and we have plans for more of those community conversations. We did a survey for everybody who was there, got information. What do you want to learn? How can we help? What resources do you need? And that's one of the things that we're working on in 2024. The next little picture is our Hands of Four art contest, and we invited community leaders to come and look at the 470 art contest entries from local 9 schools, age 5th grade to senior. The next picture along is, can you see the purple T-shirts? That's during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we sponsor with families and children to, do your hair purple and your nails purple, and try and raise awareness by doing fun things, but also, the Clothesline Project is where we go around the schools and the colleges, and every purple T-shirt represents a intimate partner violence homicide. And again, one of those T-shirts was Maddie Kingsbury. So again, it was something that's very powerful and can talk to the community in a different way. Human trafficking, I put that in because we're working with Winona State students on putting a community conversation to hotel and staff about recognising signs of human trafficking. We have 2 new hotels coming up in Winona. It's very important that we get this training out to those people. I want to give a shout out to the Winona Post and to Leighton Broadcasting, who help PPP with their letters to the editor and editorials and the 30-second radio ad. Again, people might blank it, but for those people that need that information, it gives a shout out that we're supporting them. That little picture of the toddler in the stroller, we go out to do tabling, we give freeze pops and stickers and go out in the community to share what we are and give out brochures. And we're actually engaged Winona at the Easter Egg Centre August 28th, if you're around and you want to say hi. And the next slide, please. On our Facebook page, we have Take It Down, which is information for teens, how if they get a photograph, an intimate photograph posted on a website, it shows how they can contact and take that photo down, which is really important information for teens and families. Just quickly, the photograph next to it is April Assault Awareness Month, where we work with Winona State and the Advocacy Centre, marching and talking about, again, sexual assault awareness, prevention. The one in the corner, we sponsored a group from the cities called All the Pretty Horses, which was a transgender group that came to talk about advocacy and resilience in the transgender, and we that was a great presentation. And also on our Facebook page, we try to keep up with not just local, but national and state, like the Supreme Court just overruled the ban on guns for domestic violence who were offenders, if you've read that. But you can look at it on our Facebook page and you can see all that information there. And the last couple of slides here, if could do the next slide, yeah. So I just wanted to share about the Hands of Four. This was in April. We had 470 entries from 9 different schools. This is to raise child awareness, child abuse awareness. And it just melts my heart that 470 children sat with a blank piece of paper, drew something that meant to them to be a positive message on what Hands are for. And then we displayed all those 470 entries at Winona National. And then we had 9 winners who had their amazing artwork displayed on the billboard outside Target for a whole month. And we had a celebration with the mayor. And sometimes a lot of these subjects like domestic violence, child abuse awareness, they're hard, they're difficult to talk about. We don't want to say anything. But when we have events like this, it opens up all sorts of conversations, especially with our youth. And so 470, I just thought that was amazing. And then the last slide, thank you so much for your time. I know you have lots of other things to do, so really, really appreciate being here. The Darkness to Light, the money that we received in June, we have worked with Live Well Winona and Vanessa Southworth, and we have supported 50 online training seats for this national child abuse training, where we invite community leaders from different businesses, different organisations to come and learn how to know what child abuse prevention is, how to report child abuse, and to work within the community. So we couldn't have done that without your support. So really appreciate that. And yeah, I could talk to you for another 20 minutes, but I'm sure you have a lot of other things to do. But I really appreciate the time. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
So much, Helen. Thank you, Ward.
Yeah, thank you for your work. Just a comment, having dealt with small children the last couple weeks in my immediate family. Billboards are great, but I don't think children look at billboards.
No.
So are you using any social media things? Have you
Yes.
created any, that gear
Yeah.
towards
Yeah.
kids?
And we are, things are changing, you're right, different ways. For that billboard, though, for those winners, they...
Oh, absolutely. It's great recognition and
yes.
everything. I'm trying to reach the kids
Yes.
that They look at their iPads or their,
Yeah.
and so is there something there that they're seeing? Or were the billboards put on some kind of iPad app that they would see? I mean, I'm trying to reach a different audience. I
Yeah,
guess.
no, we've put things on cards and given them away, like notelet cards. We've put them on posters. I think, we want to encourage those kids to be creative and, we're always open, and that's why it's so great to have those coalition members, because, we're not just going one way, we want all ideas. So, yeah, we'll definitely
I guess
think
I would
about
say a focus group of preteens, teens, and what hits them? Where do they get their information? Again, it's altogether different than I get my information.
Yeah, and even Facebook and things isn't always
Old
what
school.
teens
At
look at.
Facebook, kids don't use Facebook. It's old school, unfortunately.
But we do have, educators and other, people on our, group that have all sorts of different and new ideas. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Mark?
Do they get displayed at the schools before they come to the event at the bank?
Say again, sorry.
They get displayed at the schools.
We've only done it at the bank because they sponsor
Yeah,
the
okay.
winners, but that's a great idea, and we could definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comment, children don't know what banks are either.
No,
They don't go to the bank.
no.
Good attendance,
And there is, and I've been to it before.
but I was thinking that then
Yeah.
everybody at the school would get
Would
to
see,
see it.
get
And
more recognition.
honestly, some of them are, in fact, I have a picture of one of them still on my phone because the kid that did it, hands are for helping turtles. And then he's got a picture of a turtle, which I think was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and sometimes it's too easy to put things on a computer and to flick, to actually go to a place and see the pictures and to celebrate in person and to make that kid feel amazing to see it on a billboard. It's
Oh, absolutely.
worth $1 million.
Thank you so much. for what
All
you
right.
do,
Thank
Ellen.
you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda was 7.2, receive Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office 2023 Annual Report. Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioners, thanks for having me here today. I'm Ross Reichard, the medical examiner for Winona County and the chief medical examiner for the Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office. So we just go to the next slide. And so this is just a refresher of the jurisdiction that we cover. The dark blue counties are the counties in which we provide full medical examiner services for. The light blue counties are the ones that we do consult autopsies for. So we're covering a pretty good number of individuals in this region. And so on the next slide is really to highlight the core of the people that are really supporting the office. We're up to 4 forensic pathologists. I'm joined here by my colleague, Monica Kendall, who's our supervisor of our death investigators. And then I think the people that we really have to highlight are our local field investigators, because they're the ones that are responding to scenes 24/7, 365, and are really the frontline staff that are helping the wheels on the bus go round and round, quite literally. Then they have a large support staff by other investigators back in Olmsted County. And then the bottom line is just a number of groups that support our administrative functions, such as putting together data for this kind of report. So on the next slide, you'll see that we have the total population here. We had 350 deaths in the county. By the time that we've had them reported to us, we approve cremation permits. We look at hospice deaths that are reported to us and registered with us. We're involved in 89% of the deaths in the county in some way, shape, or form. So we have a pretty good eye on what's going on. 313 reported to us. We did 46 postmortem examination, 39 autopsies, 7 external examinations. And so that's when we typically have medical records, or we can do imaging like a postmortem CT or x-rays to look for injuries if need be, or rule out an injury. We seem to see that number growing as you have elderly individuals on hospice or sick people on hospice, and they fall and they don't get
evaluated because they're on hospice, but we need to know if that injury, if there was an injury that could have contributed to their death. So that's often what those cases are. 29 that we did without postmortem, 28 without postmortem examination. And so that basically are people that have documented injuries or things that make it fall under our jurisdiction, but we have enough documentation of what happened that we don't need to do a postmortem examination. We can just review the medical record, investigative reports.
Just a quick
Yeah.
question. You said 89%, so what happened to the other 11?
So those are people that would die and they would fall under it's a natural death that occurred under the care of a physician. So this could be someone who died like in a hospital from their metastatic cancer, but they weren't on hospice, for example. Yeah. Good question. So the next slide is just a refresher of what's on the death certificate. We've spent a lot of time in the last few years talking about death certificates. So we have the cause of death, underlying reason why they died, the manner of death, which is the circumstances. There's 5 categories: natural accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. And then there's lots of other information, but that's public health type of information that's on there that doesn't go on the death certificate the family receives. That's obviously very important. Was there an injury at work? Were they pregnant at the time? Et cetera. This is used by the families, obviously for closure, but also obviously for legal reasons. And then this information rolls up to the Minnesota Department of Health and ultimately to the CDC. So you kind of can see up from our frontline investigators going to the scene to how this all the way rolls up to those big numbers that we see of like how many of X number of deaths occurred each year. So that's how it's all connected.
Seems to be missing, am I missing it, drug-related? And
Oh,
you
that
got
was-
Tobacco,
So the drug related would be under the cause of death.
cause of
So
death.
these are just other examples of other boxes that we check through as we go through that's capturing that public health kind of information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And we get follow-ups oftentimes from the Department of Health for additional information, like they want to know about the transportation deaths, the pregnancy-related deaths, et cetera. So we go to the next slide. So this is by manner of death. And so, and this is based on the colorful graphs are reflected on when the death occurred in the county. We're going to see some dark blue bar graphs later, and that's with the injury occurred in the county and also if the death occurred there. So we're not, in other words, we're capturing if someone gets injured in the county and transported, or if someone gets injured somewhere else and gets brought into the county. So we have that granularity of data. So this is if it occurred, the death occurred in the county. So you can see the vast majority of the deaths are natural. We had 37 accidents and 7 suicides. And so we'll go into the details of each of these categories. So the next is death by unnatural causes. So we've removed the natural deaths, and so we have asphyxia or choking. And so we had 4 of those. 2 were a food bolus or choking. 1 was a carbon monoxide poisoning, which is a suicide. And then 1 was a positional asphyxia. So someone was in a position where they couldn't get themselves out of it or extricate themselves and breathe. We had 1 drowning, and this was a person that had a seizure disorder and drowned in water, a small amount of water. 21 jumps or falls, which we'll go into more detail. 6 motor vehicle accidents, 8 poisoning or drug overdose deaths, which is down significantly from last year. But each one of these categories we'll explore more in the subsequent graphs. So then on the next table is suicide by means. And so we had the 1 asphyxia I mentioned. We had the 1 jump or fall, someone jumped off a cliff. We had 1 prescription drug overdose and 1 hanging, and 3 firearm related deaths. So people typically commit suicide by what's the easiest to access from where they are at that point. On the next slide, we have suicide by age group. And so again, just trying to see, we are obviously always concerned about any suicide, but particularly in the young and youth, if there's clusters, sometimes that will happen. So we didn't have any in 11 to 17 or 19 to 25. And so most of them were in the older category of 26 or above. But again, we have that year over year data, which is one thing that's nice. We got that comparison. The next slide is the suicide rate per capita. And so this is even if the injury occurred in the county, but the death occurred elsewhere. So we had 7 suicides, but they all were injured in the county and died in the county, so none were transported. And then we have the red bar, which is the Minnesota average. These are relatively small numbers, so can change that bar graph kind of dramatically, but you can see where each county in the region stands. On the next slide is homicides, and so there were no homicides, and that's because of that's where the death occurred in the county. So when someone is found somewhere, that's where we pronounce them, and then that's where the death occurred. Doesn't mean that the injury didn't occur in the county. On the next slide, we have the homicide rate per capita. And so this is where if they were injured in the county and then transported to another location and died. And so that would be the one there that we have included for Winona.
So I'm sorry, I must be misreading it. So why like Goodhue is 2, the bar is way up, but Olmsted is 2 and the bar is way down? What's the?
Because that's where we only had 2 injuries in Olmsted County that resulted in homicide. So believe it or not, Olmsted County only had 2 homicides in which they were injured in the county and died in the county, but they had 9 homicides last year.
But it's per capita, so.
So it's per capita.
Goodhue being that the bar chart looks so huge is because it's just a smaller,
Correct.
okay.
Right.
I guess, okay, I don't know why that,
Yes.
I don't know why you measure it that way, but that's okay.
It's because it helps, we're using it because that's how people are reporting it, like from the CDC as per capita, and that's our comparison numbers.
Okay.
But like in Olmsted County, there was 9 homicide deaths in the county, but only 2 injuries occurred in the county. So the other 7 were transported to Olmsted County from other locations. And then again, it's per population. So that's the number per 100,000. So if you quadruple the size of Winona County, then we can lower that
Yeah.
bar.
There you go.
Gotcha. I mean, just when you look at a bar chart.
I know it's very, and these are such small numbers.
Yeah,
And it looks
catastrophic.
Does.
Okay.
On the next slide is accidental deaths by type. And so, as I mentioned, we had the choking deaths. We also had the drowning with a person with a seizure disorder, and then we had a huffing death. On the next is accidental deaths by vehicle crashes. So there were 6 deaths that occurred in the county. 5, the injury occurred in the county. So one of them was injured outside of Winona County, but transported into the county and died. So we had 4 automobile SUV type deaths and 2 pedestrians. We'll explore that a little bit more in the next couple slides.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I think this is, just want to make sure, if there's no information that just for a year, it must mean it's just 0?
Yes.
Perfect, okay.
Yep, so that means there's none. Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of interesting as we go from county to county because, like, I think it was Wabashar, like last year, maybe 2 years ago now, had a lot of motorcycle accidents that were all related to striking deer, for example. We went to Malheur County and they only have pedestrian and motor vehicle deaths. They have no snowmobiles. They've had no bicycles. They've had no trains. It's just a nature of like the dynamics of what's going on. So Winona's got a lot going on. It's kind of, I mean, because you have, a lot of, you have the train, you have the river, you have lots of different, you have trails, you have, so.
Students.
Yes, college students.
Yep, they're in college.
Yes. So, and this is the location, and so you can see the array of type of injuries that have occurred, or fatalities that have occurred, and the locations reflect in the various dots and the type of vehicle or accident that occurred. And so, if we go to the next slide, W21, which is at that top left corner, and W23, like sort of in the middle purple corner, those are pedestrian versus trains. And then there's a cluster downtown, but that's really just because of the scale. So if we want to go to the next page, we've blown up that region. And so you can see that it's really not just like one particular street or intersection, but it does give you a sense of the location of where they occurred. So a better sense of it. So the next slide is the motor vehicle fatality rate per capita. So again, per 100,000. And so there were the five that occurred, the injury and death occurred in Winona. And you can see the other counties as well. And then on the next slide is accidental falls by age group. And so we're just sort of tracking there's a lot of attention to falls and fall-related injuries. And obviously they're much more common in the older population. And we can just see this age graph keeps expanding to the right. Fortunately, but it is something that we have to be cognizant of. And if we go to the next page, we can see where the injuries occurred. 4 of the falls were in assisted living, 7 in a care facility, 9 in a decedent's residence, and 2 in other residences. So that means they were either in someone else's house or a business or some other location. So again, just to try to get a handle on where these falls are occurring.
Stay home.
Stay home with handrails.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal, even in hospitals, it's a huge issue. It's a reportable to the state event, and just trying to manage falls is huge because there's just not enough people to do it. And it's like, when do when does someone need to go to the bathroom? When does someone, want to get up to do something? And I think that's the real challenge. It's like, maybe they know someone's going to come by at 10, but it's like 9 o'clock and they really want to get up and do something. And that's when, unfortunately, things occur. But it's complicated. So on the next page, we have deaths related to poisoning or drugs. And so there was a total of 8, and we'll go into each of these in more detail. The other one was a huffing related death, and that's the dust off 1,1-difluoroethane. So we do see those occasionally. On the next is the drug overdose by age group. And something else that we've seen recently is that is in most of the counties, it's the 45 to 64 that has the highest number of drug overdose deaths. It's a little bit younger in Winona, and I don't know if that is because you have college and post-college age population here as well, but it's striking in some of our counties that all the drug overdose deaths are in that 45 to 64. So I think it's kind of busting through the mentality that a lot of us have, that it's sort of the teenager 20-something person. So.
And remind me, so you were going 2019 to 2023, 2019, were we at the COVID? Does COVID play into any of this?
So that 2019 was right before it. And so there was a huge uptick towards the end of, the middle and the end of COVID. We have started to see a little bit of a trend down.
Terrible.
Yeah. So, yeah, we definitely have seen a trend down. But I mean, it went from, just to give you a sense of, these are just completely ballpark numbers, but in 2011, that's when drug overdose deaths became more common as an accidental death than motor vehicle accidents. And that was like 30,000 deaths. Then it went up to, 60, 70,000 drug overdose a year in the United States. Then it was trending down. And then we basically peaked back up at nearly 100,000 deaths. So over 90,000, on a running average. So so when you talk about epidemics, I mean, for medical examiners' offices, is this like adding whole additional forensic pathologists just to do drug overdose deaths? So, but it is trending down. So. So this is the per capita rate on the next slide, and that's there were 8. So the deaths, the injury occurred in Winona County, and none of them were transported. We have seen less of the transported ones, and if we go to the next slide, we can sort of talk about it in a little bit more detail. So 5 of the 8 were illicit drug overdoses. 3 had fentanyl and some component of it. And so we have seen a couple times now where we have multiple deaths at the same time. And it's often, they've all had fentanyl as a component of it. And I think in some of these, as we've looked into them on a case-by-case basis, they're often chronic drug users. This is not a new drug user, but they may have gotten something like they were expecting cocaine or methamphetamine, and now they have fentanyl, and that they don't have a tolerance at all to the opioids or a low tolerance to it. And then they overdose very quickly, and that's why they're not being likely transported. So you have 2 deaths in the scene, so no one could even rescue each other, even if they had Narcan. So we continue to see, we've recently had a case of carfentanil come through, which is like, that was in the headlines a couple years ago. Carfentanil is super potent, like the only known use that I'm aware of is for like large animal anesthesia, it's like elephant, not, yeah, like, so it's a super potent fentanyl. So these various analogs are still floating out there. And methamphetamine was still there. But I will point out there's a huge decrease from 2022 to 2023 from 11 to 5. So that's a positive. So next slide. Deaths by natural causes. And so heart disease and cancer are sort of the leading causes of death across the country. Neurologic is, probably something that we're going to see increase over the years as the population ages with dementia, stroke, and that sort of thing. You can see the really dramatic decrease in the lung disease or pulmonary. That's probably a reflection of COVID. I also will point out under liver disease, there was a peak in that after COVID, and there was like a big bump in alcohol consumption, and so there was alcohol-related liver injury and death subsequent to that. So we're seeing that go down. So hopefully things are going back the right direction. So deaths by age group. So this is getting more and more skewed to the older population, thankfully. You can just quickly look at a graph, and the more is the older population dying, that tells you they're dying of natural diseases. When you see bumps in the younger population, that's the non-natural, the accidents, suicides, and homicides. And so although there are a few in there, by and large, it's skewed towards the older population. So. And the next slide is just a summary of our activities, and they've been relatively stable over the last several years. 245 investigations, we signed 74 death certificates, 81 scenes, 46 postmortem exams, and 313 deaths reported to us, so relatively stable. So happy to answer any questions. A lot of information quickly.
This is very interesting. Commissioner Ward?
One question, the drug deaths.
Yep.
Do we keep any statistics? Would more people have died had not Narcan been used? Or do we track if somebody's received Narcan,
So that's not something that we would have access to.
but maybe an ambulance? Or
Yeah, like ambulance. That's been a very tough source of data to get, from my understanding, because you could have law enforcement respond, you could have a friend respond, and they never take them to the hospital. If they go by EMS is not necessarily going to call law enforcement and say that we just had a drug overdose because it's a medical event. And so trying to pull all that together is pretty challenging.
I can understand. And it's Narcan is much more readily available now. I think you can go buy it at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
If you need to.
Yeah,
You don't have to go buy it, but if you better have it yeah.
well, and there are people that sometimes feel like, should you have Narcan?
Yeah.
And so, one of our new pathologists, he was in Baltimore, and it's like, okay, if I'm walking to work and there's a unconscious person on the street, should I have Narcan? But I don't know if you've ever talked to anyone who's been overdosing and given Narcan. That is not a pleasant experience for them. Yeah. So if you give someone Narcan, they go from being very high and comatose to in basically immediate withdrawals. And so you may not be their friend when they wake up, so you have to be prepared. The other challenge is that people's tolerance is so high for opioids that one dose of Narcan may not be enough. Like I've seen medical records so Narcan's a very short-acting drug, the opioids are very long-acting, where they have to put people on a Narcan drip in the hospital for days. If they stop that drip, they stop breathing. So that's how much opioids they have in their system and what it takes for the Narcan, which to me is just, the first time I saw that a couple of years ago, I couldn't even believe that I was reading that. I was like, this has got to be an error. But yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to, every year I say this, but I mean it every year, is working with Dr. Reichert and his staff on our cases, like unfortunately our murder case that we had, or have still, and overdoses. They're great to work with and they're always available to help with our prosecution. So thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank
for-
you.
Yep, appreciate it.
much.
Thanks.
I believe that, I'm sorry, we have some comments. Commissioner Elsing and then Commissioner Ward.
Yeah, I actually was just gonna bring up the fair also, and I wanted to bring up the dairy cow situation for those that walked the barns, just so they understood what was going on, but I think we kind of covered that. One of the other issues I just brought this up a little bit, but seeing some issues in a few different townships that I'm part of is just revisiting the planning and zoning enforcement, or code enforcement, different things like that. And I know there's been some talk years past, just doing a little digging into it as to how do we structure that, who is kind of the badge and the gun of this, and what we can do there. So it's a little ongoing discussion. Perhaps at some point, maybe we'll get it on a committee of the board. But I think where we're sitting right now, and maybe that's something we can talk a little bit about at the committee of the board, but I want to revisit that, the enforcement of our planning and zoning aspect for building permits and things like that. I'm getting some feedback from a multitude of different constituents in my district that I would say are normally fairly quiet individuals that are saying, hey, we've got some actions going on that we just don't agree with, and not everybody's playing by the same rules. So at some point, I'd like to visit that. Those are the two things I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward.
An event that's coming up, I don't know if everybody got an email invite. Larry and Ross Graydon are holding I guess it's kind of like a Healthy Soils Day at their farm, August 1, from 10 to 2:30. There is a RSVP required because I think there's a lunch and everything, but they're having breakout sessions about cover crops and different plantings, and it was 4 different groups, but it's nice to have an event in our local area, Altura, and look for it on the website.
It's from 10 to 2:30.
Yeah, 10 to 2:30. Larry and Ross Graydon, Altura.
Thank you. Ms. Holte?
Before the board adjourns, I have a request to make an amendment to the lost ballot language.
Sure.
May I speak now
I
or?
think.
Yeah,
Yep.
we got the fair covered.
Yep.
Come to the fair.
Come to the fair. Pay the $7.
So if amenable by the board, if we could have a motion to amend the amended motion. So still have the break after the question mark, and then have it read, if approved, collections from the sales tax would replace property tax as the source for payment, and then the rest of what it says.
So moved.
Yeah.
Motion by Commissioner
So
Olson.
what was the change? That sounds like, I like it,
It's
but,
very similar, but it's the wording and,
okay,
yeah.
Just
right.
a little
It
more.
says the
The
same.
etiquette
Okay.
is a little different. Yeah, I like it.
great.
So motion by Commissioner Olson, second by Commissioner Meyer. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Cool.
Thank you.
That revision is approved. That concludes our regular.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Elstein, second by Commissioner Meyer. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. So we'll take a 5-minute break.
Please.
And before we come back, there's one item on the agenda, discuss housing study recommendations and next step. Lou, are you teeing us that one up?
So are we discussing whether we will discuss it or are we actually discussing?
So,
Action.
sorry, may
Yeah.
I? So, as I understood, I think it was February when we had the presentation. Because we couldn't hear everything that the presenters were trying to say, that the board wanted to have them come back and to finish sharing information. However, now we have the new Planning Environmental Services Director on board with Lou. And so we're kind of at the point of, they've had some time to analyze the city's plan as well as the county's housing plan. or study, I should say. And so they're at a point of where to present perhaps some recommendations, some options, some opportunities.
So we're going to get the recommendations?
Sure. There's recommendations in the plan, and we can discuss, we can discuss those and kind of next steps for this issue, so.
So not today. We're going to discuss doing that later, right?
I thought we were going to do that this
No, we're
morning.
going to do it. That's what I'm trying to find.
Oh, okay. Sure. If
And we can discuss it more later if you want.
you're ready to go, I'll, by all means,
I
absolutely.
mean, there's pieces of it we talked about that could take more analysis if you want more information, but it kind of depends on what you all are interested in and want.
Yep.
But I can talk about what's in the plan, what's in the housing study, and we can discuss that and then talk about some next steps.
Absolutely.
Um,
The reason I asked is there wasn't anything else in the agenda packet, but
Right.
yeah, go for it.
Heidi, do you have those slides available? I was gonna have her bring up some slides that we can run through, but essentially, back in February, we were here with the consultants and we went through kind of a quick presentation. This was the presentation. I think at the end, it kind of got quick. We had a room full of people.
Yep.
It kind of, we kind of got through it and was like, thank you very much. And we moved on, which is totally fine. But I just wanted to kind of revisit that study and that presentation and kind of skip to the end. Heidi, slide 16. And we'll talk about the barriers analysis and then some of the recommendations at the end. So the difference between a typical housing study, the city's housing study, and ours was that we added a large component that went beyond the normal just data analysis that's in a housing study. We went ahead and did another analysis of barriers to housing, and then as part of that, the consultants analyzed, we had 4 partners, City of Winona, Goodview, Lewiston, and St. Charles, along with us. So there's 5 jurisdictions, and they analyzed each of those jurisdictions' comprehensive plans, zoning ordinances, and then data maps that go along with those documents, and then identified issues within them that are barriers, as well as recommendations for alleviating those barriers to make it easier for different types of housing to be built in communities. So that was really the piece that's different. And so as far as Winona County, the housing development components, so the barriers analysis, this was actually done for all 4. The different components were, they looked at sufficient land, so they looked at existing land use, future land use maps, and identified areas that are available to housing within communities that have been guided as such and haven't been developed. So is it vacant and it's guided towards housing? And then they calculated those numbers. They looked at the quality of data and mapping. A lot of including Winona County, a lot of the jurisdictions did not have existing land use maps. So it's hard to calculate that when you don't know that you might have a future land use map that says, from 2014, these are the areas that we're going to be looking at for housing. But there's nothing, we don't have anything that says like today, this amount has been developed and there's this much vacant. So that's that's both a barrier as well as a recommendation to develop. Zoning codes, residential districts, they looked at different housing types that are allowed within those housing districts, and that's been a big, it's been identified nationwide that, most zoning ordinances and zoning districts are heavy on single-family housing. They don't allow a lot of duplex, triplex, quads, the missing middle, which is the different types of things between your big, larger apartments and your single family homes. A lot of those housing types aren't even mentioned in zoning ordinances. And so if you want to even allow somebody to think about developing those, you should have a place in your ordinance that allows it and at least has a process for allowing that.
Most of that's the ability to commingle into an R1 district. That's the hardest part, because there might be
Right.
some, one of the things that I'm seeing as some of these older structures are maybe becoming inhabitable, you end up with a lot down, or you end up with an empty lot, but no bank in their right world, in their right mind, is going to give you a loan to go put a new house up in an older district. It's immediately devalued, right? So what do you do with that lot? The lot sits empty and you can't do anything with it, because you can't build a new house, you can't build a duplex, maybe you could build a duplex if you 1 to 2 tops. But if you look at the cost aspect of building a duplex on there, oftentimes there either A, isn't enough room, or B, it's just cost prohibitive. You can't span that cost. So I think we're in this weird transition as houses are being condemned or torn down. What do we do with these empty lots? Because we sure as heck can't go build a brand new house on it. You're almost forced to go to triplexes, quadplexes to just try to get it to cash flow.
Yeah, and it's different within the cities than it is in the county. So, there's a whole different set of issues that comes up. But
Lou, just in thinking of this from a bird's eye view, would the development in the county itself and county jurisdictional areas, is it really going to happen because of sewer and water requirements? So it's going to happen within the city limits of one of our neighboring cities?
90% of it, yeah.
Okay, so do we really need, as far as our zoning ordinance, is this all, these suggestions, these barriers, do they exist in our own zoning ordinance? If we aren't going to be the developers in the rural area?
Yeah, I think there's different barriers, and we're not, you're right, we're not looking at, developing townhomes in, a rural area or higher density apartments or something like that. But there are, we see already right now, lots of requests for flexibility on farmsteads, adding a dwelling, making that easier, adding a place for a family member or elderly parents, children to live on the farm. So a lot of those are similar to, or very similar to like an accessory dwelling unit or allowing like a cottage or above garage. That's really hard for us to permit right now. It is allowed in the shoreland district. There's a provision there for shoreland, but that's mainly for like vacation homes and bunkhouses and those types of things. But we get more requests for like farmsteads for that type of relief, and it's really hard to deal with in our ordinance the way it is.
Okay.
Chris and then Josh.
So to your point though, almost not a month goes by that we don't have a conditional use permit request for something on less than 40 acres. We have a dozen or more of those every single year. And I guess to that point, Eric Johnson made a comment to me at one point that that's kind of burdensome to our staff. And I don't know if that's how our director feels about that or not, but from my perspective, if there are things that we can do to facilitate stuff that we're approving anyway most of the time, and to make that easier for our residents, I would support that and encourage the board to talk about it. My thought was, so this is the chapter about the recommendations that was out of the housing study. And it sure looks to me like an awful lot of the recommendations refer to, maps and in directions and stuff that was done with the 2014 comp plan. And that I assume we will be updating once we do our comp plan over, which I know, we want to do and have had on the agenda, but haven't done but now you're here, so yay. Okay, so I assume a number of those issues will be addressed through the comp plan process.
I think that'll be the best place to be addressing most of the issues that are land use based in the plan. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then in this, there's a table on the housing study, there's this table, and it, has a bunch of recommendations. And On table 4, in that section, almost everyone suggests that Winona County Housing Trust Fund, that we would potentially establish. So for sale, affordable units, market rate rental units, senior housing, maintenance and preservation of existing housing, special needs housing, and homelessness prevention. And particularly to this last point, which is a part of our job just through Health and Human Services. If there are, I mean, my thinking is to ask staff, we're getting 132,000 for 2 years in a row and then some more. So our local housing aid that we're getting from the state, are there ways that we can use that to address work that we need to do anyway as a county, or to facilitate any of these other barriers that are identified in here that are, that are appropriate for the county, not really directed at maybe one of the city governments? That would be my thinking.
Josh and then Marcia. I'm sorry, I thought you had your hand raised.
No,
Yeah,
I did.
Josh and Marcia.
So, yeah, I agree with Commissioner Olson. It's, a lot of this probably isn't going to pertain to us. I think when I brought up the last comment about these districts and what's happening and what I see in owning rentals, commercial, real estate, both, I think the bigger part is I think some of the cities are turning to the county and saying, what can we do? What help is there? County, state, federal, whatever it is. So one of the things that I would say to encourage is to talk to the city officials and say, hey, you might have to get creative to create some of these things in these zoning districts, because let's face it, if you can go build a triplex in Olmsted County and know it's filled indefinitely versus go build one in Lewiston where you might struggle for the same cost, the door costs the same, right? Might have a little bit difference in the land cost. Where are you going to go? Right? Do I build a Dairy Queen in downtown, or do I build a Dairy Queen in a town of 1,500? The cost is the same. And that is the struggle that a developer has, or anybody has, whether it's a retention, they're going to retain it and rent it, try to sell it, or whether they are building it at spec, whatever it is. And so that is the real issue. Even when I was in Altura, mayor there, and we talked about, hey, how are we going to grow? We've got 88 households and an increasing tax base, or an increasing tax demand. I said we have to somehow remain lucrative to a builder. Why does a builder want to come here? Why do they want to develop something? So I think that's where I go back to, yes, the county has very little to do with it probably, as far as a direct influence. But I do believe that we can encourage the city officials that are in their own districts to start being a little more open-minded as to how a contractor thinks, what it's going to take, and it might not be status quo. It might not be the way we're used to doing this. And so at a county level, how can we encourage a municipality to start looking at some changes?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are recommendations specifically for one of the barriers that they highlight is attracting developers. And so there are some suggestions for how municipalities would be the lead on that. But I've talked to each of the cities since the housing study came out, and we've had discussions about that. I've offered my own services if they needed to contact me and partner. And I have gotten a couple of phone calls just to talk over things since then. So that's been nice. But you're right. I mean, a lot of that is going to be city led. And I think the county, from our perspective, what we are able to do is do studies like this to provide that to communities and to help with those resources, just to have somebody to bounce ideas off of, or perhaps review a grants application, that type of thing. We don't have tons of staff ourselves to be dedicating tons of time to that either. So, but we do what we can.
So what do you think? What do you think we should do with this information?
I would say we should be keeping it in mind, incorporating that into our comprehensive plan, the pieces that make sense for the county. One of the other things, not to get off track, but you look at what the county can do as far as land use goes. We don't have an existing land use map, so that would be part of and a future land use map updated would be part of the comp plan. But I can tell you just, I mean, our residential areas are built out. You know, there's no space in any of the residential areas, R1, or rural residential, urban residential, community development, they're all built out. So having locations, no matter if they are small, we're not going to solve the housing problem, you know, through Winona County, but we can create some spaces where if somebody wanted to build some homes in Pickwick or Nodine, you know, our comp plan guides a certain area towards that. And that'll be part of that would be a conversation with those communities to see what's their vision for, what's Nodine Heights' vision for Nodine? What is Ridgeway's vision for Ridgeway, you know? Like just the way, no more homes.
Stop signs.
So, I mean, that might be the case in some communities, and other communities might say, yes, we are open to you know, an expanded CD district or RR district.
Marcia.
Well, you bring up that's very important, because what people don't realize, if we start building out these little unincorporated areas, the stress it puts on the next level of government, township, especially if they're in charge of maintaining the roads and all those types of things. So it's important to have those discussions. But we talked about this money. Didn't we allocate Buffy Bronick, SEMSHA, a bunch of money? We kind of tentatively promised her some money.
Not from that, though, not from the housing aid.
Yes.
Yeah, it was, wasn't
I
it?
believe.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, and they're the Housing Redevelopment Authority that represent us. So I mean, she's got some development plans. One of the things when we have these conversations, I think a lot of people that haven't ever lived in the country don't know the cost of living in the country. I specifically remember an elderly, and in my neighborhood, we got a bunch of elderly that come and they build their dream houses. They're big, expensive houses, high tax. But then, oh, my road isn't plowed, you know, and I distinctly remember one senior citizen lady, do you know a drugstore that delivers to the rural
Oh, dear.
area? And this was 4 or 8 years ago. I mean, they don't understand the responsibility, you know, so it needs to be part of the conversation when you talk about developing, even around the valleys here. I had to give an elderly lady a ride up Pleasant Valley. And I thought, how do you get to, because she didn't drive anymore, how do you get to, you know, down to the Walmart or Target and get your groceries? And there's no walking, you know, there's not a walking option. And so she had to use, I don't know if we still have Lyft or Uber or a friend. So, I mean, there is a cost when we develop out in these valleys. And I do have a big concern over like Wilson Township. We really need to include them in any of these expansion conversations, because they do their own zoning and planning. And there's always pressure on Wilson Township. And then, our, to Commissioner Olson's thing, our county zoning, I still have a lot of people thinking you need to own 40 acres to build a home. And they say, why are all these houses going up? I said, well, we changed the rules a while ago. You don't need 40. If you got 40, you can kind of do it. But if you got less, you got to have a conditional use permit. But we still have this archaic thing, farm help, mobile home, and then you got to remove it when that's gone. And yeah, so that needs to be updated.
Yeah.
And the whole new concept now of shed houses. Got one going up in my neighborhood. It's going to look like a shed, but they're going to live in it and store some stuff in it. So from an appraisal standpoint, the assessors.
And they're affordable.
Well,
affordable, yeah.
I tried to buy one years ago, Jerry Lindhander's up in Altura, and the goal was to put a house on it. So it was a house, beautiful log cabin house inside of what looked like a big machine shed.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. At the time, there had been 3 comps. The banks didn't even really know. Appraisers didn't even know what they were. And the comment was, that's fine, but you have to remove the house out of that shed. I tried to classify it as a mother-in-law's suite. I tried to do all these things to figure out how to build a house on a property that had that. It was impossible. I eventually had to quit. I could have spent the money, bought it outright without a bank, but even then, if I would have borrowed the money on the house, it would have still forced me to take it out. Because we were not allowed to have 2 on one piece of property. So it has made it very difficult for people that want to do things to do things. And the second thing, I'm going to piggyback off from what you said, the cost of living in the country is something I've been saying on water boards, Whitewater Joint Power Board, different things like that. You know, the realtor, the banker, and I'm not picking on anybody, good people, but nobody talks about, hey, when my well goes bad, or when my sewer goes bad, my septic system goes bad. And they're quick to give the money out. We look at the roof, we look at the siding, we look at the windows, but nobody's paying attention to probably two of the biggest investments in that property, which is a well and a septic system. So what's happening is of course, the banks want to loan the money, the realtor wants to make the sale. Yeah, we do our septic system, but nobody's really looking at, is this a shallow well? How long is the septic system really going to last? And then when the funds are needed to replace them, what I'm seeing is either A, on the well side, it's not being done, or two, on the septic side, they're turning to the taxpayer. And to say, hey, co-share this with me. The people that live in urban areas are basically paying an allotment to use water and sewer every month. And it's like renting it, right? And so when the city says, hey, we need more rent, the rent goes up, you adjust marginally by some percentage and away we go. The urban population is nobody, and I've said we need to bring emphasis in this educational piece to, hey, you want to buy a rural piece of property, remember there's $100,000 looming over your head. And that can go bad at any time. And so to take them off the taxpayer funded subsidy to replace something that needs to get replaced, I think there needs to be an educational piece that goes out there that says, hey, this isn't just about the property itself and the structure, but you have these other two things you need to worry about, because there is zero talk about it when you make a resident or a transaction in the rural district.
Yeah.
And they're turning to the taxpayer, and that's putting the burden on the taxpayer.
And now it's internet too. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And Lou, you had more slides, I think, right?
I did, but honestly, I mean, we've touched on most of what I was going to talk about in those slides. I mean, we can, Heidi, if you want to advance the slide. Key recommendations for Winona County, identify the vacant developable land, update the comp plan, future land use planning. Next slide. Zoning code map updates to bring in line with the comp plan once that gets updated. And then partner with cities on housing development planning. Next slide. And then the housing trust fund. And I mean, I think those are the big things is land use through the comp plan and zoning ordinance. The partnering with and offering assistance to the communities, and then funding and supporting your housing trust fund. I mean, hits everything that the county should and could be doing.
Chris?
It was my recollection that we did not actually approve the final document for the housing trust fund. And the way that I remember this is that
She's coming back.
we said we would, if possible, use the state money. But then Ms. Brannick came back and what she said is that she couldn't use that for match. So then we did use the levy. So I didn't think that we had ever made a decision.
I believe that we did.
I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah.
But I'd have to go look to be 100%.
Yeah, but I would, because I mean, the thing is, I don't remember that we gave her all of it.
It wasn't the full request. It
No,
was,
and so what do we-
It was adjusted.
Yeah. Because to the extent that, I'll just say then, to the extent that we could use that funding to advance some of these initiatives or remove these barriers, I would love a recommendation from staff on what to do.
To that point, completely separate from these discussions, a short while ago, I emailed her and asked her if we could get an update. I guess Maureen, can you, or maybe Marcia, you're on the SEMCO board, right? Maureen, could you just ask her for an update on what's happened and what's going to be happening in the future?
And isn't she scheduled? Didn't I
Yeah,
see
well,
that
it's
in
on
your-
the list of
Yeah.
stuff that
Yeah.
should happen
Okay,
when
so
it can.
no need then.
Yep.
I've got two other things. Wilson Township, that is a unique situation, but they were invited, weren't they, Lou, to take part in the housing study?
I don't know that they were invited. I mean, we invited a number of different entities to participate in like the steering committee and then like offer feedback. As far as being a partner, that all happened before I was involved with.
Okay.
I don't know if Kay reached out to them or not.
They're a tweener. but-
Yeah, and they have, they virtually have no staff. So I mean, yeah, we kind of bombard them sometimes. I mean, the city and.
And what Chris mentioned and Lou agreed that the best place to do it is as we update the comprehensive land use plan, which I completely agree with. But if at any point, that process, which is important, is going to take a while, right? if need be, we could theoretically move faster on something if it's something needed to happen outside of the comprehensive land use update, right? Because that's going to take a while, like a year or two, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as tentatively, I mean, we haven't talked about timelines, but I would hope RFP, get a consultant on board, maybe by the end of the year, early 2025, use 2025 for planning and adoption of the comp plan in 2026.
But if landowners or developers need something done sooner, we could theoretically look at something outside of that larger process and get it done. Like all these issues that we've discussed, we could conceivably do it sooner, right? It'd be nice to do it in terms of the whole package, but I don't want someone to have to wait a year or two if we could possibly get it done sooner than that.
Yeah, I mean, if something comes forward to react to, we could react to that sooner.
Like what Chris was saying in terms of the farm dwellings, all those things.
Oh,
we
the
could-
40-acre thing?
Yeah.
It's conditional use permitted now.
Yes, right.
I mean, anybody wants to spend a lot of money, we'll figure out how to.
A density, changing the density standard would be probably something that would take a bit and could probably go through comp plan process.
Because I think a lot of people would have opinions.
Okay.
And for rural folks, it's kind of
Absolutely.
more relevant than mine.
Absolutely. But I saw what happened to my family farm and how it's chopped up and divided. Yeah, people have definite different opinions on that. Absolutely.
But one thing, that's, I think everybody's kind of on board with is like the soil standard. We've heard about this time and time again, that needs to be rethought and loosened up again a little bit, because we're hearing a lot of variances for dwellings on prime or class 1 through 3 soils that I think everybody's like, well, that shouldn't really be, something that we're concerned about. So that's the standard that I think could be addressed earlier.
Side of the hill.
It depends on, but from what I've been hearing from you and Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, I think there's some simple things that we could do along that line. Yeah.
Prefer to protect that prime ag land, but that's a larger discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Lou, I know a lot of the housing study started with the premise that we were growing. And when the deed study says that the population of Winona County is shrinking by 2045 by a significant number of people. So we have two conflicting sets of numbers, that one is driving more density, more people, smaller area. And the other say you don't have more people, you're gonna have less people.
They're not really in conflict, but there's different things going on with demographics. So household sizes, number one, are getting smaller. So same number of people, smaller, even less people, but more households. And that means more units are still needed. At the same time, you're having demographic changes where people want more choice and different types of options. So they have only a couple of options to them for housing, where the demand is that they have more options. And that would require more building to provide those options. Namely like the missing middle type of residential options for housing. And then at the same time, we just have a really tight market. Demand, I know that the population is projected to not increase, but you talk to realtors, bankers, people in planning offices, and we hear from people all the time who are trying to move here, can't find a place to live, because there's literally 15 places available in town. And so they're getting pushed out. I mean, maybe to Goodview, maybe out in the country, but that doesn't help Winona, or another community who's seeing people leave. So they need to be building in order to provide that housing for people who are coming here, or for those additional households, people who want to stay. Executives, people like the planning director who wants to come to Winona County and live close to their community, but has to live in how many people are going to Holman or Onalaska and commuting back.
Packer fans.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't want them
Employment
anyways.
standards.
Be insulting, guy.
I am.
That's right. We need to change our employment
We saw,
standards.
I saw former Commissioner Jim Pomeroy at an event at the Winona Arts Center, and he also said the same thing, looking for houses in Winona from here. Large family from Winona ended up over in, I think, Holman as well, too.
Arcadia, I think.
Arcadia, okay.
Cheaper rent.
Well, I mean, that goes to cost too. I mean, when you only have 15, places on the market, that cost is just going to stay up no matter what.
Sure.
So,
But how many houses in Winona are, there's certain neighborhoods, they're very low, they're old, they're very low valued houses. And we don't really have I hate to knock it down and such, but there's cities that clean out those blocks and rebuild. And Winona has chosen not to do any of that, right or wrong.
I mean, there's some areas that make sense to do that type of redevelopment. And then there's a lot of people are focusing on keeping those properties up and keeping them from falling into disarray because they are your affordable housing. Your new, no matter how much you build new, that new housing is not going to be your affordable housing unless it's subsidized deeply.
Well, that alludes back to my point, as we're seeing the late 1800s houses, you can only
Fix them up.
fix them up so much until it's just not cost effective to do it. And that's what I'm alluding to is these 120, 30, 40-year-old houses that are starting to go down. What's replacing it on that lot? And you can't go put a new house on it. It's not feasible. So that's just getting creative thinking as to opening up these districts and saying, okay, we might have to think differently.
Absolutely. Anything else, Lou?
Not unless you have something.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Anything else from the committee of the board?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Elting,
Second.
second by Commissioner Olson. Any just further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye.